Welcome back. We had a great discussion last time and we're ready to pick up right where we left off. Do you think the phoenix of the shipyard going down created ignited the condominium effort in Collingwood, and was it the condominium effort that brought a lot of outside influence into Collingwood that helped stir something up, or did we just use those additional weekenders for our benefit to fill seats on things that we were trying to promote? What was the benefit or the not benefit of that whole condominium? Because that's really shaped where we are today.
I always love playing town historian role.
Now,
I wouldn't say the condominium boom. I would go further back. Collingwood is a unique area in that we're bounded by Blue Mountain. Blue Mountain, and I don't mean the actual Blue Mountain resorts, I mean the Blue Mountains. Along the mountain there were 5 private ski clubs. Those private ski clubs brought us what I call the permanent part-timers. People who built chalets at the base of their club, came up every weekend skiing throughout the winter, sometimes would come up throughout the summer. But guess what? The people who were coming up were presidents of banks, Bay Street, lawyers, doctors, and they were people who had culture in their home community and extremely supportive of the arts. We had people up here who sat on the Stratford Festival Board of Directors, the Shaw Board of Directors, the Art Gallery of Ontario. And when they came up here and they saw something like the Blue Mountain Foundation or Theatre Collingwood, they would lend their expertise, but they would also lend their dollars. Mm-hmm. So we had a rich, long-standing heritage of people who saw the value of what they could foster in the community, and they supported it. And those people are the people who became really our first wave of people who moved up here when they retired.
yes.
And then the condominium started.
Okay, and so I remember a study supported by the province. It was called the Givens-Parsons.
Malone Givens-Parsons.
And they put together a pretty substantial review of Collingwood on what would make Collingwood an area a world-class environment. And there, after 400 pages, the bottom line is that Collingwood had to find some way of providing alternatives for bad ski days and bad summer days and other days that weren't great. They called it weatherproofing. So weatherproofing became the fundamental support mechanism for Interwest to come to Collingwood and get financial support by the province, which was one of the very first large grants to a private sector organization, sort of, that blossomed into what you have today, which is an unbelievable, huge engine to our south, or our southwest. Is that going to provide the future of Collingwood with a strong rationale for continued growth in arts, culture, and heritage?
I would say yes, because I think it's not just the condominiums. The Collingwood I grew up in did not have subdivisions. In the last 15 years, subdivisions, developers from the province's setting of targets for, population bases, we have had a population growth in this area that's phenomenal, and it's expected to continue. Those people are coming here looking for things to do, and whatever community they're coming from, some have high expectations, some are just gobsmacked at how much we have for a so-called community of 20,000 people. That some weekends can be 40 or 50,000 from the whole area. So we're like a small town that can act like a big city sometimes, or we can act like the small town. But we still need those amenities, and we need the balance. But we've certainly got the sports side really heavily developed between Blue Mountain, the Bay. Look at all of the different tour organizations that have grown up in this community and developed and offer that as, you can come down the Beaver River, you can go out paddle boarding, you can take a tour, you can be taught to do almost anything around here, sport-wise. But they also look for an activity. And Interwest is interesting because they like to draw people to a facility such as Blue Mountain Resorts and keep them there. So they have embraced the Elvis convention. Elvis weekend, I know people from Collingwood who spend time up listening to the tribute artists there because of the atmosphere that they've created with their square. So there's a crossover into the culture, and there's an integration into what the community already offers. And it sometimes it's a value added, sometimes it's a standalone, sometimes it's things we haven't thought of. I mean, Blue Mountain often hosts, I mean, they have a weekend of salsa competitions. I don't think and I mean, they host, the little kids come up for dance competitions. There's all that sort of stuff that happens that the average person can just go watch for free, which is fun. Because we need a combination in the cultural world of free activities as well as paid activities. Because that cultural world can be a job prospect for someone. People who come and intern with Theatre Collingwood realize that there are opportunities to make that their professional life. And it isn't always on stage, it's behind the scenes too, in production, in sound production, in lighting, in stage managing. It's fascinating to watch.
So are you a happy Collingwoodite looking back and now seeing where we are?
When I think of where I was as a child and what was available to me culturally, oh, definitely. I mean, my mother used to load me in the car because they were transplanted Torontonians, and we used to go down to the city to see live theater. I don't have to do that anymore. We have live theater, we have a multitude of musical opportunities. I mean, I love the performing arts and all that sort of, I love the visual arts. We've got a lot of art shows, we've got a lot of studio tours, a lot of open houses, as well as, I mean, even our council chambers, they do rotating shows in there.
Kathy?
Well.
I mean, Kathy and I, we have both lived in Collingwood for a long time, and we both chose to go out into the country
But
a
it's
little bit.
definitely what's available.
It's our
is-
home. It's
yeah.
our home community. How do you feel about today's Collingwood and the future?
Well, I'll start with changes from when I moved here almost 30 years ago. And I'd like to just raise one more point and really hand a huge tribute to you, Peter. There's a point that I don't think that we've identified here specifically, and it comes back to the culture of the place and the quality of life of the place. And that is how trails play into what a community is all about. When I first moved here, there was a fledgling trail network. There was
yes.
a trail along a rail line that had been abandoned. There were a few other trails, but the various suburbs and the various neighborhoods weren't really connected other than by the road system. There weren't all that many sidewalks in the suburbs, but now there is a culture of healthy living and exercise and recreation around cycling and active transportation that is part of the culture in Collingwood that certainly wasn't here when I first moved here. That's one of the things that makes me happiest, is that we've tied the culture of a healthy community and recreation and active lifestyles in with all of the other things that we've talked about in terms of the culture and the identity of the place. Our trail system is magnificent. You can go right out to Blue Mountain, you can mountain bike at Blue Mountain, you can come back on your bike to Collingwood, and now there is public art along the trails.
Yeah.
There's signage about the history of little places that used to be along trails, former factories and a dairy and that sort of thing, and as well as public art. A healthy, vibrant cultural community includes opportunities for people to do recreation and lead a healthy, active lifestyle, as well as participating in the arts, and that's all part of culture.
And I think
Thank you to you
Well,
for
I
being
thank you.
such a proponent
You-
of trails and active lifestyles,
You-
as well as culture.
You know, Kathy, that the strength, because you and I both believe in community development, the strength I had was my group. I always had a very open relationship with the group. they set the budgets, the priorities, the initiatives, and I just took the flag and ran with the flag. And as we're all, accolades go to Mr. Stewart, who somehow listened to my pitch and supported it, that the Georgian Trail was the very first trail in the province of Ontario to receive funding from the province, both from a feasibility study and then the actual capitalization of it, and the support for those 4 or 5 years when we struggled to try to convince those 5 municipalities to join hands and create something that was going to be a tremendous resource, which it has.
It has.
And there's a lot of people I would have to thank under that process to make things what they are today. And yes, there is a tie-in to healthy living and the quality of life in Collingwood. I'm happy to have played a role in that. It makes me feel good when I hear people talking about the trail system elsewhere. And people say, well, you should see what's going on in Collingwood.
And
I think that's all part of our culture, and that's why I think people are attracted to live here. That's why I think people are attracted to come here as tourists, because we really do have a well-rounded community, and that is our core identity. That's our culture.
And that's the objective too, to make, as Catherine mentioned earlier, a community that provides opportunities, and one of them happens to be culture. So if we want to strengthen, I think, the cultural element within a community, we have to somehow make it feel as if it's a part of the community, as opposed to apart from the community.
and I think
Because
the
all
other-
the ingredients, in every community, the
Yeah.
ingredients are there.
Yeah. Yes.
Something, somebody, like I said earlier, some event has to bring them all
But
together.
I think it also comes to the point where, I remember the formation of the Georgian Triangle Trail, or the Georgian Trail. That offshoot became the beginning of the trail system in Collingwood.
Yes.
Also, because my first iteration on Parks and Rec, Peter would go, we can build half a kilometer here. They were kind of trails to nowhere. And when you talk about what's happened in the last 30 years, people who arrive now and see this well-rounded, fully connected trail system that takes you throughout town. I got to tell you, there were times it went this far and stopped, and then we couldn't get through there, so we built over here, knowing eventually the pressure would build to link them up. And I think the evolution that once through the whole trails, and there is a separate trails advisory committee now, who always worked, who manually worked in the early years on the building of them, but then looked to the initiatives of, let's put the history of the Smarts cannery. What can we do to enrich the trail system? And it's not that they're totally built out everywhere, but that famous 5% in lieu of parkland from development, you either took land or you took money. Sometimes if it didn't make sense, you took the money and put it into the trail over here. That was the part of the park that worked. But now people just cannot believe that. And the funny part is we still have some citizens within our community who are still discovering the trails.
Yes.
Despite, and that comes back to how do you get people to know about things? Get
And the
involved,
map of the
embrace them.
trails,
Yeah.
it doesn't just identify routes and the whole trail system, but it identifies attractions. It tells you where the library is. It tells you where the museum is. It tells you where there's public art. It tells you where there's signage about the history of the place. It's a wonderful system, and it really is part of our culture.
But for students today who are the potential Peter Dunbars of the world, how do they go into a community and find those people? That would be an interesting checklist to develop. Land in a department and find out you're not going to start as a director. You're going to start as an underling. You need a job. You've got to get the lay of the land of a community, because not everybody is fortunate enough to go back to the place they came from. So they have some background. They have to be able to do an inventory of what's out there.
Mr. Stewart and I talked about me leaving my job that I was quite happy with in Wasaga Beach and going to Collingwood and starting over again. And I can remember he said, I think it's a very rich plum of a place to go to. I think there's opportunities there beyond imagination because of the stock of the community, and it seemed to be true. Collingwood had a lot of very well-experienced people retire and do great things for their community. George Christie comes in as a
Chainsaw George,
and on the weekend make a trail, and
Yeah.
I have to go in Monday and talk to Carmen about who built this trail on the weekend, and I didn't know, but it was George and Rad
Yeah.
decided that they would spend their weekend and their money
Yeah.
on a pre-designed area for a trail, but they were tired of waiting and they just went
Did
and
it.
spent the money and did it. George developed the trail system box that's all throughout the community that I've taken to 30 trails presentations and said, do this. This makes money for us, this promotes our community, this drives this. It's a very positive reflection on what we're doing. But I want to be quite honest with the trail development. It was certainly a strategy that I used on trying to get the community wanting their connections. So for many years it looked like dried worms on a plate. And that's what I called my slideshow, dried worms on a plate, because you looked at this map and it didn't make a lot of sense.
No.
But I was trying to push the envelope to make community members want to get that connectivity so that they could ride their bike or they could walk and do the thing that was not just healthy, but better than taking your car. It was a better option. You didn't have to find parking. You just took your bike downtown and you went to your friends on a bike. And I think that's the strategy I tried to use. And remember, it took 28 years.
Well, and that's the
It took
point.
a
The
long
other
time.
thing is that we haven't even touched on is municipal funding for whatever the project is. So every year you had X thousands to put into trails. And how much can you actually do with that money? Or in the case of when I first came on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, finding a way, and it was the old original FAP, Financial Assistance Program,
Grant program.
of giving municipal money to assist community organizations and groups to further their dollars.
Because they were doing
So,
great work.
yeah.
And we wanted to reward those champions.
So we became, the BMFA have been a very good example for a specific project. And what developed was, if I could get municipal funding in a recognized way through to an organization, they could then go to the province. So again, it's the leveraging of dollars. So it wasn't always that the money went to the municipality. Sometimes it was the municipality funding an organization in order for them to then go get further recognition from the province to support this project, this activity, this festival, this whatever project they had. And it worked. Sometimes it was a planning project.
Yes.
Yeah,
Some-
the
some-
province was always interested in investment and return on investment.
Yeah.
And how many dollars is it going to lever in the community? How many jobs are going to be, like they're very number intensive, what we
Yeah.
needed to see.
Yeah.
My personal working philosophy, and I'm sure it was Catherine's too, although we'd never talk about it, is basically to jam as much provincial money into Simcoe County as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And if I had to help a tiny little railway modeling club
Yep.
holding their pen so they can fill the application
Yep.
out, I will.
Yeah.
Or if I can throw money at the McLaren Arts Center because they don't need help holding the pen,
Yep.
I would.
Yep.
But that was basically my working objective, was jam as much provincial money into Simcoe County as I possibly could.
And probably in the arc of our time of being involved, the provincial money's gone like this. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's dry, it's all only into bricks and mortar, it's all only into planning. It changes, it shifts. It will be interesting to see what happens to funding models under the Ford government.
The province offers a lot of flavors at times.
Yeah. And
Well
projects
said,
that
well
were there
said.
aren't, or monies that were there aren't there anymore, or vice versa.
one of the champions I have to reflect on that certainly stirred me and focused me almost down
A rabbit hole?
a rabbit hole was Barbara Wider. I met Barbara when I was in Wasaga Beach, and I was told by Barbara one day that she was going to bring a theater group in, and I was to go out and fundraise and sell tickets and make it happen. And she left my room, and I didn't know what had occurred. This
Well, who was that whirling
little
dervish?
Yeah, papers are
tornado
still
came
flying
in my
around.
office, told me what I'm going to do, and told me to get it ready in a certain amount of time.
Yep.
And to my surprise, that summer season in Wasaga Beach was a fabulous success. And she was there almost every night.
Yep.
And she wasn't happy with that. When it was over, it was, okay, what are you going to do next?
Yeah.
And that continued as I moved into Collingwood.
Yep.
And on a monthly basis, Barb would have an initiative or a thought or a plan or a program. And I believe her and I did 4 or 5 presentations about different theater sites someplace in town.
Yep.
And you know, it wasn't always pleasant for me to have to go forward and do the 4th or the 5th or the 6th presentation about we have a good idea this time.
Yep.
But it was always making it aware that a theater in Collingwood was a strong possibility, and here's the dynamics, and here's the background, and here's all the information that would make this a great place for a theater. So I have to mention her as one of the champions
Here's the
that
example of
pushed my buttons.
creating the needs, and you do always need those people who are the ultimate champion of one project or one direction.
Yeah.
Which Barb definitely was. Barb needed a little balance with reality sometimes, but you need the dreamers, and
Absolutely.
that you will find in the cultural world. The cultural world will have the dreamers.
Yes.
I mean, Barb always said we could be the next Stratford, and I always said to her, remember, it started in a tent, you know, which it did.
Mm-hmm.
I had an aunt and uncle who were in Stratford when it started, and my Aunt Maggie handed out umbrellas and programs at the same time.
That's
sometimes.
another issue as well. I've never met a minor hockey president who doesn't want another arena.
True.
So what I'm using that as an example because you really have to differentiate between what's needed in a community and what's wanted in a community. And every organization here in Collingwood will tell you what they want,
Yes.
but whether it's needed or whether it's feasible,
Yeah.
and maybe that could be possibly one of the roles of the municipality through whatever department they have that deals with those things, because they have to deal with objectivity, just like Catherine and I had to deal with objectivity in our job. We were the guardians of the provincial purse, and that money came from taxpayers, and the objectivity that we had to go into a community, to assess what is needed, to factor against a whole bunch of stuff and then come back with a recommendation was probably more often part of the job than we care to think about. But differentiating between what's needed and what's wanted, it's a never-ending tough call.
And then I think also from the perspective of a community organization, and particularly in the cultural world, looking at the municipality, they have what they are known as core services and core programs. Culture always goes into the next ring, which is the classification of a soft service. It's not going to prevent anybody dying. It's it's not our water source isn't safe anymore. So it's a funny sort of pillow around the core services that enrich the life and the quality within the community, but it doesn't necessarily have to be funded this year. Do you know what I mean? There's
no
immediacy to it. Yet, I mean, I'm still that Field of Dreams person. If you build it, they will come. I think Collingwood has almost grown up to the point where we do need our Mady Center. We do need, or 5 Points Theatre, sorry. We do need our professional grade theater space. Maybe it does need to be in that multi-purpose use, so minor hockey can do their awards presentations. You know, it's what the form of it takes. It's no longer a standalone any longer, but it doesn't have to be part of an arena either.
No.
No, but connection is important.
But connection is important.
I mean, the idea of building a community center attached to a school,
Yeah,
where did that come from?
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Or the idea of before we build this, instead of it looking like a fire hall, what other things,
Yeah.
you know, and that's still relatively new.
Yeah,
So the connectivity thing,
Yeah.
no matter what you do, whether it be a program or an event, because you should check out what other events are going on, right? And facilities. I mean, it's no longer, what is a standalone? Are they relevant anymore? You know,
and are they affordable? And I mean, always I'll come back to the love of the theater. The theater is like an arena. It doesn't always make money, but you can get it to break even and a little bit of profit, properly managed. But getting it built takes a lot of initiative, takes a lot of drive. It's going to be interesting to see where Collingwood will be 30 years from now. I hope I'm still here. Hope I see more changes.
Well, I've got to say that the three of you certainly have helped to put Collingwood in a much better position than not. And
And now we're all retired now.
I thank you all for a very informative and excellent help to me trying to show the pathway for young students who are thinking of entering into this field and seeing some of the challenges, but more the opportunities.
We've
Any
come a
last
long way
words,
in 30
Greg?
years.
Any last words?
is the camera still running?
Yep.
No. I just think if you're going to get in the business of community, there's certain things you need to know, and hopefully your students will know that. And obviously, patience is one of them. Environmental scanning is another. There's a whole bunch of things that go into understanding your community before acting for your community.
Kath?
That sounds like more homework once you start working.
Community is homework.
Yeah.
Yes.
Final words, Kath?
Oh, building on what Greg said, planning, executing the plan, keeping fresh on what the inventory is, that's all very, very important.
Mine would be people and networks.
Have a thick skin.
Talk to your people. Yes.
Have a thick skin and a sense of humor.
Yeah. And
Thank
dream,
you, friends
dream
and
big.
colleagues. It's been great. And thank you, Rogers, for your support on this process. It's been great to work with you, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to do more in the future. Thank you.